So from the video clip from the office, we can see that harassment was definitely a major ethical issue there. And it seemed like it's definitely also common behavior there. If Dunder Mifflin wasn't a fictional company, then somebody would really need to actually do an ethics audit to make sure they have a proactive ethics system in place so that that behavior doesn't happen again. We conducted an ethics audit of 3 different companies, and that's what we're going to talk to you guys about today. So here's our agenda. First, we're going to talk about our ethics audits of UPMC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then First Commonwealth. Next, we'll talk about the similarities between the 3, then the differences, and finally, we'll give our recommendations of how they could improve going forward. So first, we're going to talk about UPMC. We conducted the ethics audit with Ellie Medved, who is the Director of Fraud and Abuse at UPMC, and we also talked with Jill Gaskell, who is the Director of Clinical-Based Community Services. We wanted to talk to both of them so that we could get an idea of the formal and the informal systems. And since Ellie has kind of a high up role in the ethics department, we thought she would really give us some good insight on the formal system, and Jill gave us some insight on the informal system. So a major aspect of UPMC's formal ethics system is their I Need Clarity campaign. This is mainly used in their clinical environment, but it could be applied to all of the businesses that UPMC operates in. It empowers staff to create a pause for discussion before moving forward. So this gives them openness with superiors. So if they want to question authority, it's in a more safe way so that they don't feel intimidated. And it also allows them to take responsibility for their actions. So another important aspect of their formal system is their whistleblower hotline. It's anonymous, 24 hours, but it's also manned by staff during operating hours. And then after operating hours, they have external agents who man that. So their ethics system as a whole is a mixture of a compliance-based and a values-based approach. So from the compliance aspect, the ethics system is required by regulation and is an industry standard. When it comes to values, they incorporate values into their performance measurements. So in their annual performance reviews, 2 things that are listed on their performance review are responsibility and integrity. And their ethics system is reinforced constantly. Employees are made ethically aware from the very start of their employment. They have training on anti-theft, compliance, fraud, and also ethics and confidentiality from that very first day. Additionally, they have constant ethics communication, and this can be in the form of weekly emails that they get, and they also have access to a compliance portal on their company intranet. Ethical concerns seem to always be present when they're making decisions. Sometimes there are a lot of rules and regulations involved in decisions, and no one person can know all of the rules and the regulations in place. So sometimes integrity and ethical standards are the common ground between decision makers, and that's what they use to move forward with decisions. Ellie also addressed that the system could be the best ethics system in place. Your managers could be the best managers, but there's always going to be employees you can't control. There are always going to be those grenades who don't care about the rules or don't have a moral compass. So when it seems like there's tension or some type of conflict with a decision, UPMC makes sure that they use ethical language and bring this up in conversation that an ethical dilemma may exist. They understand that when it comes to ethics, one size doesn't fit all, and management really needs to tailor their management style for the type of employee they're working with. When talking with Jill about the informal system at UPMC, it really appears that the formal and the informal systems both align. UPMC emphasizes high quality and high volume work output, but emphasize taking the time to understand the ethical concerns behind any decisions. Ethics seems to be a part of the daily conversation, and those who perform and have integrity are the ones who are rewarded. So now that I've gone over the highlights of our UPMC audit, Courtney's now going to talk to us about her PwC audit.
Thank you, Allison. So as an intern at PwC's Wealth Management Tax Services sector for 2 years, we decided to interview my mentor, a senior associate at the firm. Some key findings from our interview include PwC's extensive new hire training, along with compliance requirements throughout the year. Each associate has their own compliance dashboard, which is all their trainings are stored. So examples of these trainings would be you watch many videos and takes quizzes on the material. The material covers complying with law and business requirements, protecting high-class data, leadership development, staff ethics training on issues such as harassment and personal independence for new hires. Emails and reminders are constantly set out regarding ethics requirements, so it's really hard to escape this topic at the firm. PwC trains their human resource representatives to use behavioral questions during their interviews. This is an example of using hiring and work assignments to test the candidate's ethical judgment and engagement. Another way they incorporate ethics into their hiring process is using background checks to work at the firm. In addition, many engagements require additional background checks. Upper-level managers and partners are very well versed in the organization's values. They do an excellent job at getting their associates engaged and interacting in the firm's role and direction. They have an open-door policy except for during meetings, so this really allows them to be approachable and for a two-way communication opportunity. We believe the firm follows a mixture of value and compliance-based approach to implement their strategy. So employees are willing to report, seek inside advice, and are aware of ethical and legal issues. However, their approach is very reactive and is rooted in law and regulation. An important aspect of public accounting is client confidentiality and conflict of interest. So a tax associate can see a client's net worth, their social security number, address, and birth date. In addition, at the firm, you're oftentimes working with really high public figures information, so it's hard to not run and tell your friend, I did so-and-so's tax return. It's important to not compromise your judgment and objectivity when dealing with fiduciary relationships. It is a minimum standard of the firm to use ethics and integrity when viewing client information. A great thing PwC does is they tend to put a positive nature in the aspect of making a mistake and reporting it to superior. So the nature of the work done in this sector relies on open communication of an error so it can be fixed immediately. Associates learn early on that if they make a mistake, they must tell their manager so it doesn't progress throughout tax season. This allows employees to feel accountability and responsibility for their actions. For more serious accounting issues such as fraud or theft, associates are encouraged to contact an anonymous tip hotline that's open 24/7. This way employees feel most comfortable reporting an issue. Whistleblowing plays a huge role in public accounting, so it's created for associates to feel no risk and to feel very safe. PwC does have a formal code of ethics for the firm, the public accounting industry, and for CPAs. It's available on internal and external websites. In addition, there's posters throughout the office with the code of ethics. In addition, they get brochures at trainings on various topics. It must be reviewed yearly. And they also have an ethics committee along with specific firm-wide compliance leaders. And each location has its own leaders that are the ones that initiate the trainings and kind of teach the material. The sector that I was in actually has their own tax code of ethics for which they follow. So I'll conclude on the most interesting aspect of the interview. The interviewee says that the firm provides a great structure for ethics to always be in the forefront for all of our accounting work. However, I do believe people will follow their own form of ethics when completing their work. So during busy season for accountants, this is tax season, top level puts a lot of pressure to get that work done quickly, and some unethical employees will do whatever it takes to get it done. They use diffusion of responsibility, they blame stress or anxiety, and kind of get that they'll say someone else will catch my mistake. So they use this to blame their unethical ways. During busy season, there's an incentive to move work quickly to finish accounts before deadlines, and those who usually don't follow firm policy just rush to get their work done. They're initially rewarded, but they'll be disciplined once a mistake is found or per work is reviewed. Those who use ethics are indeed rewarded. The work is done correctly and honestly. Associates are provided with recognition for use of integrity or outstanding performance. Firm-wide and office-wide recognition is communicated, as well as a company office-wide recognition is communicated, as well as a company newsletter or email announcement. So now I'll pass it to Aubrey to talk about the highlights from our first Commonwealth interview.
Thanks, Courtney. So for our first Commonwealth audit, we interviewed the Chief Investment Officer as well as a hiring manager, and they both expressed the importance of trust in their ethics policies. It's really important that they maintain the trust between their customers and the bank, because the customers are expecting the bank to protect their personal information as well as maintain their finances. So it's really important that First Commonwealth has an effective ethics structure as well as effective ethics communication channels. The banking industry in general is very heavily regulated and under a lot of scrutiny with a lot of new policies coming up frequently. So again, it's really important that they have that effective way of communicating these new policies to their employees. Their ethics policy is first introduced during the hiring process. The hiring manager in their interviews for potential employees uses behavioral questions to try to weed out any unethical employees. The next at orientation, the ethics training takes place, and at the end of the training, potential employees are expected to complete a test, and they have to answer all the questions right in this test in order to complete the training program. Employees are also expected to complete this process
yearly, so they have to go through the training program again and also take the test. And anytime a new policy is introduced at the bank or just introduced to the banking industry as a whole, managers are expected to communicate this new policy to all their employees, and it's also announced on their internal website. And if it's a really important policy that affects the bank greatly, they'll have a meeting for the bank as a whole where the policy is discussed and the implications of the policy are also discussed. First Commonwealth has both a formal and informal communication channels. The formal communication channels are maintained in the HR department. They have a risk hotline, which is maintained by a third party, and they also have a risk committee that is made up of different employees from different departments in the bank, and the board of directors also is included in any ethical dilemmas that come up that need to be taken to a higher level. The informal part of the communication channels is relied heavily by the bank and is really a part of the upper management level. The CEO is seen as a role model to all the employees of the bank. He communicates non-verbally to his employees by maintaining a set of behaviors that he wants his employees to emulate. He's very transparent and has an open door policy. He meets with his employees regularly, and through these meetings he asks questions to his employees to gain insight into what type of issues and ethical dilemmas they're facing, to understand what policies they understand and what policies they don't really understand or comprehend yet. And through these meetings he also expresses interest in the employees and shows that he values their work. Another form of the informal communication channel is that the company has employee surveys where they try to understand employee engagement. They want their employees to be actively engaged because when they're actively engaged, they have a sense of ownership. And with this sense of ownership, employees act more responsibly and act ethically so that the company will benefit as well as the customers. We'll have roundtable discussions with upper-level management and employees throughout the company, and the purpose of these discussions are to have a comfortable place for employees to express any issues that they're having in the company so that there's an understanding of what's really happening and how the company can resolve any ethical issues. So now I'm going to pass it over to Dan to talk about the similarities and differences in these companies and also our recommendations.
Thank you. So first, we're going to talk about some similarities within these companies that we've interviewed. First one being the whistleblower hotline that they all have. These are obviously very important for multiple reasons. It gives the employees a chance to tell about suspicious behavior they see or any unethical behavior they see. It also gives them a chance to act ethically within their business. It's also important that they all have industry-specific regulations. As we're going to go into later, it's important to know how your ethics need to fit in with the structure of your business. There's also behavioral interview questions for all the employees in these businesses. These are really important questions just because it allows you to look at your employees through a different light, see how they would react into certain situations, and if they can act ethically under stress. The next thing that we need to go into is a mixture of compliance-based as well as value-based approach. So compliance-based is very important just so your employees know what is expected of them from a very technical standpoint. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to act ethically, but it should give them the knowledge that they need to have. Value-based is more culture-oriented, so if your culture is very ethical, it will make them want to act ethically, which is extremely important in all these industries. Lastly, there's formal training at the start date as well as annually. As we said, it's very important that these employees know what is expected of them and what they're supposed to do in certain situations. Next, we're going to go into some differences from company to company. First, as we talked about earlier, PwC, during busy season for accountants, they can have a ton of work. So in these situations, there's a lot of stress, and for new employees who aren't used to this, they might be inclined to act unethically to get this work done. In these situations, it's extremely important for upper management to set a good example and show them how they need to act in these situations. UPMC, is worth noting, is a non-profit. So from a public standpoint, their job is not to gain wealth, but more provide a service for the public. So from the public's point of view, they might need to act more corporately, socially responsible in order to come across as being good in the public. UPMC and PwC also have ethics as a daily conversation. As we've gone before, ethics plays a role in every decision they make from every transaction. In terms of First Commonwealth, it's not discussed every day, but it's still very relevant from a day-to-day subject, which it should be good enough as long as the culture, again, is suitable for that kind of behavior. Another thing worth noticing is UPMC had an internal staff manning the whistleblower hotline. This could be very bad just because if you know one of your peers is on the other end of that phone, you might not be inclined to talk to them about something in case you might be seen as tattletaling on them or being insubordinate. Lastly, we're going to go into our recommendations for all these companies. First, keep in mind that social responsibility. Companies that are socially responsible attract better clients and better employees, which ultimately will lead to a better culture. Continue extensive training. Be sure that your employees know exactly what is expected of them in certain situations. Give them a chance to act ethically. Make sure to include some outside ethics officers. These officers might not know your company as well as your inside officers, but they will be much more unbiased and give you a clear perspective of what you could improve. Don't let profit overvalue ethics. It's important that ethics takes the front of those two things, just because if you act unethically, that could deplete your profits completely, but more importantly, you want to be ethically aware, top to bottom. Lastly, make sure the structure of your system fits. Structural functionalism was something we've gone over in class multiple times, and it's important that employees know their place in your culture as well as in your ethical structure. They need to know their line of sight and how they need to act in all situations. That being said, from Team 3, I want to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them.